I think we have to understand something. As much as everyone wants to impute leadership and authority to President Trump, I think he's really the creature of the top 1%. In other words, you've got to look at the interests of Wall Street as well as the City of London banks who are joined at the hip with Wall Street. You have to understand that there are other elites that may not be part of the banking elite, but are nevertheless interested in subversion and destruction. And they are advocates for perpetual conflict on the assumption that we benefit from it.
And this is the destructive conundrum of predatorial capitalism. It inevitably turns into an authoritative economic system. The small percentage position with absolute power starts to dictate to the majority what is beneficial. The thing that they quantify is beneficial is rarely beneficial for the populace as a whole. It's true that for the top 10%, there could be some lucrative benefits in the short term, but it will always end up destroying the very economic foundations that helped support that destructive choice in the first place. And history has shown this consistently.
The globalist elites, if you want to call them that are part of this top 1%, are losing badly in that arena. So what do? You turn to the other area where there are enormous oil and gas resources as a means of compensating yourself for the loss you've taken in Ukraine. Remember, the idea behind Ukraine was let's dethrone Putin, let's regime change Russia. Then we can rape it, strip it of its resources, divide it into smaller parts. That's now the plan for Iran. So I think that Trump, who just a few months ago actually spoke very rationally about what was in America's interest and frankly in the interest of the West, is now simply saying what the powerful billionaire class of donors want him to say and do. And they want war in the Middle East.
This is truly an interesting time we're living in historically. It may have repetitive aspects historically, but in reality, it's the global financial system circling the drain. This time reminds me of the period called the Gilded Age, a time between the 1870s and the 1900s in the United States. A time of both immense economic growth driven by industrialization and significant social problems, including stark wealth and inequality, caused by controversial actions of powerful businessmen nicknamed robber barons. Just like today, the new barons have the same mindset, but they're taking their show on the road now globally. They did the same thing to their own nation, dividing it up, raping it of its resources, and exploiting workers. But this time is much different. They're not the only game in town anymore.
Because there's something else, and I think you implied this in some of your earlier remarks. On the one side, the Western finance system is debt-based. In other words, that's how we finance ourselves, that's how we grow. Foreign investment comes in. Well, George, foreign investment is not coming into us anymore. Nobody wants our treasuries. As Nassim Taleb says, the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. Gold is. So I think that's part of the problem. Secondly, that old system that we have used, we in the United States, weaponized it to bully others through the SWIFT system, through the IMF, through the World Bank. All of these institutions from Bretton Woods forward were designed for us to bully others into doing what we wanted them to do. Nobody wants our debt. They want to de-dollarize because every time they do business in dollars, they lose.
You see, this is the perfect storm, the colliding of immensely destructive economic decisions, like a debt-based system. This was doomed to fail. Because the system needs someone to be the fall guy for the debt, predatorial economics are now seen by most as being monstrously lopsided. Weaponizing the financial system has now isolated those who depend on it working. The victims of the system now are so terrified of using it that they rather try something that is radically different than to continue down the same path. This is what's happening now. This isn't rocket science. This is a natural recourse of things and societies that want to survive, No longer are they going to put themselves by the watering hole where the predator is ready to pounce.
And what we're beginning to see is in many countries around the world, particularly in places like Africa, places like Senegal, for instance, that has gold mines, they're basically concluding we'll never get out from under the debt burden that we have. So we'll just nationalize it. And the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians and the Indians, everybody said, fine, do it. Join us and get out from underneath this oppressive system. So Trump is now lashing out at the insistence of the billionaires that funded him and brought him into office and everyone that opposes him. Now, that's a losing proposition, George. We have no chance of success at all. It's a dead end. But he's somebody who still thinks we're living in 1991. And his frame of reference is the late 1950s, early 1960s.
And this is the problem with reminiscing on a glorified nostalgic notion. The past is the past, and these old times are not going to come back, and things are going in a different direction that we may not even imagined. That's because, even though the robber baron mentality of industrial conquest is still there, the immense economic growth driven by industrialization in the 1870s and 1900s isn't. Right now, the economy is propped up artificially. It's stagnating, with very little innovation and very little growth. Without QE constantly being pumped into the economic system, it can easily buckle, even though economic brute force of the robber barons of the past is still used as a go-to playbook. These methods can no longer be swallowed up by a rapidly growing economic system. So all that is left is the collateral damage that is felt by the average citizen now.
So he dismisses out of hand countries like Iran or India or Pakistan or Zaire or any number of places in the world as irrelevant, as though they all have to do what we say, because if they don't, we'll punish them with tariffs. This is backfiring badly on us, and we're headed to a serious financial crisis in the United States and the West.
This is when anti-social economics meet reality. An elevated point of view makes one believe that they are in a position where they don't need anybody else, but that doesn't work with global economics. There is a shared camaraderie, even out of shared self-interest. But this is the issue of a skewed philosophy, a mindset that put them at odds with others, the same others, or economic systems that is needed in order to function. For example, a debt-based system needs others to hold on to that debt. But when everyone is turned into an economic adversary, the outcome is obvious. You are left increasingly isolated.
The thing that we have figured out in the United States is that our ballot box is broken. Everything that Trump is doing are things that Biden would have done or did do. In fact, one can argue that he's extended the Biden policies and made them worse, when in fact he was elected on the assumption that he would put an end to those policies and extricate us, that he would shed unnecessary overseas commitments, that he would reduce spending in order to cope with this enormous national sovereign debt. What's he done? He's done the opposite. What has Congress done? The same thing, the opposite. The uniparty is now in the hands of these multi-billionaires that decide policy.
The rise of the uniparty. You're going to hear this a lot in the future because this is the final stage of predatorial capitalism, metamorphosing into its true form, the final form, the oligarch system, and the Gilded Age system. But is he right? Does voting now come obsolete? Well, you have to do the research. For example, what policies have changed that the majority of people in this particular country want to have change, that both parties are responsible for? The facts will shock you. Deduce of that what you will. But you can see his point. When people put you in a position where they think you are going to do something different, and you don't. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know their reaction won't be good.
It doesn't matter who you vote for. You get the same kind of fool and maniac. People say often, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for, you get John McCain. Well, John McCain was a hell of a lot more rational than what we're seeing right now. So I hate to say that about John McCain because I met him and knew him. He was a very nice person, and I didn't agree with everything he did, but he was rational. Americans are increasingly convinced that the ballot box does not work. Now, that's very dangerous, George, if you stop and think about that for a minute. I mean, those of us who are serious about our American citizenship, those of us who have served our country, I mean, there are millions of us, and to finally conclude that voting is an utterly pointless affair means that our republic, for all intents and purposes, is a facade, a fraud. That's a very dangerous place to be. That is more and more widely accepted inside the United States. This bodes ill, especially as you go into a financial crisis.
It's not that the ballot box doesn't work. It's just that the ballot box is now being strangled by the system that prioritizes monetary gains over what people think. The ballot box works fine when it comes to social issues, but when it comes to financial issues that is deemed outside the peripheral view of the masses, well, that's a different story. The fact that he's bringing up these reservations on a problem he sees, it shows that the issue is now affecting the average Joe. This is optically not a good look from any point of view.
And stop and consider what happens if we're stupid enough, and I mean stupid, to provoke a wider war with Russia and China as well as Iran. That makes no sense at all. We're not prepared for that. We don't have the missile stocks. We don't have the munitions factories. We don't have the production base. But that plays well. I don't know how much longer it will play well, but that's the sort of thing people are resorting to try and hold things together. I don't think it'll work. I'm beginning to wonder if this Epstein thing is probably going to bring President Trump down. And the reason I say that is that we are discovering something that they discovered in France in the 1780s, that this aristocratic class, in our case, the top 1%, that's really ruling the country, is unworthy of that role. They are degenerate. They are decayed. They have no business governing us. And they do so exclusively because they control the financial system.
As a career military man, for him to say that carries immense weight behind it. To say that the elite ruling class is degenerate and decayed means that his faith in the system working at optimal levels is extremely low. It also means his morale is justifiably low. But historically, he is factually telling the truth. Because a healthy, functioning, growing society and a healthy economic system doesn't look like this. It is not debt-based. It doesn't have such cringe behavior at the upper echelon of the system that it is unrealistically monstrous. We're so focused on random monster behaviors that are singular. But from what he says, monsters seem to be at the top, making decisions that you have to follow.
These are not Rockefellers who built oil industries. These are not people that built plate glass industries or automobiles. Those people are gone. The only one that can arguably say that he's built anything lately is probably Musk. But the rest of it, forget it. These people are financial capitalists. They made billions through financializing the system. Transaction fee after transaction fee after transaction fee. But what does that produce for the American people? Nothing. It impoverishes us. It destroys our jobs. So that's where we are.
His rational explanation of what he sees makes perfect sense. This is an entirely different class system that was in the past. This is financial finagling. Some might even call it financially gaming the system, which it is in a way. Wall Street works the same way. There is no real tangible aspects to it. It's a highly volatile, emotionally based financial system, influenced by a number of external sources. He is right to point out this is not the Rockefellers. This is not the steel industry. This is not the oil industry. An example of this is the billionaires that were created from the beauty industry. In reality, this doesn't help society grow in a stabilized way because it is built on amenities. It is luxury-based production, not a necessity for exporting. In reality, this is vaporous economics. It's extremely fragile, and not prone to stability. And this is why he's calling it out.
And I think that's where the French were in 1789. They suddenly became disgusted. The one person that they believed in, almost to the bitter end, was the king. And it became impossible to believe him any longer, and ultimately that brought everything down. Well, a lot of people have believed in Trump. They thought he was different. And you know what they're discovering, George? He's not. He's exactly like the people we voted against.
Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, of 12th century France, once coined the popular phrase, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," and this particular phrase fits perfectly for this scenario. The starting point of good intentions doesn't necessarily mean the ending point of good results, and that's what we see here. If a predatorial financial system ends up devouring the very people who need it, then trust is slowly but surely lost in that system. But in the end, as a military man, he is acutely and strategically aware of the consequences of what that means for society as a whole.